Hi friends, it's Casey. Today we're going to make some art with no art supplies. We're just going to use basic things around the house. I've got a pen here. This is a gel pen, but you can use a regular ballpoint pen. I've got a pencil. And you're going to need a ruler. And I've just got a piece of printer paper. And then I've got some other random papers. This one is just a piece of tissue paper, came in a gift bag. It's got some sparkles on it, but it doesn't need to be sparkly. Just any colored tissue paper will do. This is a piece of brown packaging paper. You can get it in an Amazon box, whatever. You know, this just comes through the mail in boxes, pretty common. These are all envelopes. These are security envelopes. These two I got in the mail, stuff that got sent to me. One was from some kind of survey. This is just an envelope that I have. I have business envelopes for mailing things, and I just took one of those. Anything that's got a pattern on the inside will work. So you just cut the edges off of the envelope, and then you can use the paper inside, and the patterns are really neat. They all have kind of different patterns. I have two in blue and one in black. And at this point, I wasn't sure which one I was going to use, so I just brought them all. Now we're going to start making our picture by drawing some lines. So I wanted to have borders on both sides of the picture. So I'm just going to use the pencil and draw a very faint line on each side. And I'm not measuring, I'm just eyeballing. If it makes you feel better, you can measure to make sure that your line gets straight. So I have one side that's bigger than the other side. And I wanted it this way because of the picture that I'm going to do has more weight on the right side than the left side. So I wanted to balance it out by having more of a border on the left. So now I'm just going to take my pen and I'm going to start making a pattern right along this line. And it's just a line and making little curly cues. Now it looks like I'm taking my time here, but this is actually sped up. So when I did this, I really did take my time. And I used it as kind of a meditative practice, where I just shut my brain off and just let my hand do the work. It's very soothing. This is a process that is known as slow draw. There's an artist, Amy Miracle, at Mindful Art Studio, and she does slow draw. This is her concept, where you just do the same kind of repeating pattern over and over again. Let your mind shut off and just let your creativity flow. And by doing the same kind of pattern over and over, it puts you in a meditative state. It helps your body and your mind to relax. I'm just adding little dots along the outside edge there. And I don't really have any of this planned out. That's the thing with slow draw. You just do whatever you feel like doing, and you do it slowly and carefully. And it turns out to be actually a really neat way to draw. I decided I wanted to put some lines in. Having the organic shape of the circles and the curlies, I wanted to contrast that, so I decided to put some straight lines. And when I do lines like this, kind of stripes, I like to have ones that are different sizes. So I've got a thicker one and then a thin one next to it. And because I'm using a gel pen, it's not exactly even. You can kind of see that little blob there. And you can really see where it left a blob, and then I smeared it with the ruler. But I decided to make it purposeful and just did the exact same thing on the other side. When something goes wrong, make it look like you meant to do it. This is just repeating the same kind of shape that I initially made, and I'm just making it bigger. These curlies were fun to make, actually. I really like kind of the organic shape and flow of these things, so I decided to do kind of a vine with leaves. And I like to make my designs go off the page, so I have leaves that go partially off the page and not just contain everything within the page. It makes it seem like the artwork extends beyond the paper. The paper is kind of like a glimpse into the artist's mind. It's like a screen where you can see what's going on, but then it goes off the paper, and so you don't quite know what's on the other side. Now here I'm just putting some squares because I didn't really know what I was going to do. I did have an idea of the picture that I wanted when I began. Not really the designs on the borders, but I know what I want to do for the center of the picture. And putting the squares in, you'll see later, this copies some of what goes on in the picture. It just adds continuity. I don't know if you've ever taken those Scantron tests in school, but they had those squares on the edge of the page like this, and that's what it reminds me of now that I'm looking at it. It's the same kind of thing, like filling in the bubbles. I was always the kind of person that had to get the bubble filled in exactly. I couldn't leave any part of the bubble unfilled. I couldn't go outside the bubble. I think it took me longer to fill in the bubbles than it did to know the answer to the question. So now I've got the border done, and we're going to do the picture in the middle. And we're doing a landscape, which I don't do a lot of, but I do rather enjoy them. And we're making some rolling hills. And then we're going to put a little kind of jagged line in here to represent a tree line in the distance. And then some mountains. My mountains are pretty jagged. Maybe they're more bluffs with trees. I used to live in an area that had a lot of bluffs. Not so much mountains. But you can make your hills as bumpy or as smooth as you like. So with the pencil, we're going to add some shading. And I'm just going along the top of that line there and the tree line. And I'm using the side of my pencil. And I'm making it dark right at the line and then getting lighter as I go up. And this creates a lot of shadow and play of light. And it really sets off where each of these hills are and gives them some distance. And I'm not shading all the way up to the top. of each of the hills because the light is going to be hitting the tops. So you want to leave that part light. I'm just taking my finger and smudging and just blending it all out. And of course it leaves pencil all over your finger. And you want to clean that off before you continue, because I have found out the hard way many times that when you have dirty fingers and you keep working on a piece of art, you're going to smudge it at some point. So it's better to just clean your fingers in between. Now in this thin part, obviously it's going to get a little outside the lines, just like the Scantron bubbles. That's what an eraser is for. This is a soothing process as well, very meditative. It's like coloring, but you don't have the stress of having to choose which colors. Some people like choosing colors. I don't know. I kind of get overwhelmed sometimes. The life of an overthinker. That's partly why I do art, is to kind of shut my brain off a little bit and try not to overthink things all the time. If I overthink my piece, it doesn't turn out. So it's good practice just to play and see what comes and not really think too hard. I'll usually put on some kind of podcast or video or something in the background while I'm working to keep my brain occupied and not have to think too hard about what I'm doing with my piece. So as you can see, the landscape is coming along very nicely. The darkest part is right in the back at the mountains. That's about where the middle of the page is. So it kind of leads your eye right there. Now we're going to collage. So I want to put a sun up in the sky because there's a lot of empty space there. And I decided to use the tissue paper. I thought red was a little bit of a bold choice, but because it's tissue paper and a little bit see-through, I think it'll be okay. Now I'm going to use the cap from a juice bottle as my template to create my sun. You can freehand a circle if you want. I tend to not be able to draw perfect circles, so I'm just tracing around my bottle cap. I do have a compass, but you can't really use a compass with tissue paper. And there it is. I think it looks fantastic. I'm going to use Mod Podge. You can use Elmer's glue. You could even use tape if you really wanted to. You could use a glue stick. I like Mod Podge for tissue paper. If you do use Elmer's glue and you happen to have tissue paper, I'd recommend putting it in a bowl and adding a little bit of water and then using a brush to spread it on. If you put the glue directly on the back of the tissue paper and then stick it down, you can kind of see glue lines and things when it dries if you're not careful. So now I'm deciding which of my envelope papers I want to use. And I like the pattern on this one the best. And we're going to put a little house nestled among the hills. So I'm just cutting a piece and figuring out what size I want to use. For the house, I'm going to cut straight across for a little ways and then make a triangle on one side and then cut straight down. That's too high in the page. And that's much better. That balances it much better, and I'm just going to connect my little lines on the hills there because we want the house to be behind the hill. Now that we have our house shape, we need to have a roof. I'm going to use my brown packing paper, and I'm going to draw the roof shape. The roof extends from the far side of the house. You see just a little sliver of it. And then it'll go straight across the top and then down toward the corner. And you want to have that line at the same angle as the triangle. So you end up with kind of a trapezoid shape. And now our house has a roof. Now I could just glue it on top like that, but the house being on top of the roof looks funny because the roof goes on top of the house. So I'm tracing around the house and then just going to cut out where that goes on the roof shape. And be careful erasing the pencil lines on the little skinny part there. So now the roof looks like it's on top of the house. So this time I'm using my Elmer's glue because these are thicker pieces of paper. I could use the Mod Podge here, it really doesn't matter. And we have a house. This piece is already coming together really nicely, and we haven't used any kind of art supplies. We've had no paints, no markers, no watercolors, nothing. Just everyday supplies that you can find around the house. I'm just making windows. And we're going to do a little half moon window here in the attic. And these windows I'm making sure to line up with the windows I did in the front. And then a door. I'm going to outline the house because I want it to stand out and not blend into the background. I did want to set it apart. I did not outline the sun because the sun is in the background. And that's not where the attention should go. It's already got enough attention just because it's red. Now here I was adding some shadows under the roof line, but the pencil really wasn't the correct tool to be doing this. It wasn't dark enough. So I decided to take the pen and outline the roof. And then I went back and added just a little bit of shading with the pen. So we could finish here, but it's not quite done yet. I don't want the border to be separate from the picture. So we're going to add some of the color from the house and the sun into the border. That'll make everything more cohesive and interesting. So I decided the wider stripe that I made, I'm going to use the color to go over that stripe. And I didn't measure it, I just eyeballed it. It ended up being just fine. If it was too skinny, I would have been in trouble because I couldn't make anything else. This was pretty much the only section I had that was uninterrupted. As you can see, I've used this envelope before. If it was too fat, I would have just cut a little more off the side. Oh goodness, phone, be quiet. I don't know why people wait until I'm recording audio to text. So the tissue paper I decided to trace because I could see through it, so it'd be easier to get the exact measurements. I thought it would be easier anyway. It was pretty tough to get it to stay straight. Working with tissue paper can be pretty tricky. And I cut the scene out where I was cutting the tissue paper because it took a really long time. It's hard to cut something that doesn't stay like stiff in your hands. It's like way too bendy. So it took me quite a while. But I did get there in the end. And I'm just going to glue my stripes down. I'm doing the blue and the red on the opposite sides to pull the color over. To have blue on one side and red on the other side would be disjointing. Disjointing. I don't think that's really a word. That's not the word I want. It would look disjointed. There we go. So when you work with tissue paper and glue, once you put the tissue paper down, you cannot move it because that happens. Yeah. I tore it all to hell. So I decided just to take that off totally and put a new piece on. So I just cut another little section out. This time I didn't bother tracing it. And it did end up too fat, so I had to trim it a little bit. But because it's tissue paper and because it's not white tissue paper, it joined up really well and you can't even tell that it isn't one whole piece. So now we've got a cohesive picture. I hope you had a good time. Thanks for joining me. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.